there was nothing about ethics, there was nothing about what the disclosure rules are. I have seen auditors, accounting firms, as well as companies cook their books.
One of the things that was brought up during a few coffee meetings I've had this week in America with some other audit leaders, they were sharing concerns that, again, connected to budgeting, that their analytics program is almost non-existent in terms of when you compare it to other companies and how well implemented other companies' analytics program is currently. And they were saying they were also finding it very hard to explain and show the value that can bring and the return on the investment it can bring. And when you have a limited budget already, it's very, very hard for small departments that are already stretched to convince that we need this.
Right, and not only that, if you want to implement a proper data analysis team, then you need to have dedicated people, because every auditor is not able to do that. You need to get people who have additional skills in data analysis, right? It could be skills related to extracting data. It could be skills related to, designing those models which will analyze the data. And you cannot have every auditor to be a specialist in that. You need to have a dedicated person. So which means you have one person, at least one person to begin with, if you set up this kind of shop. So if somebody in a small company is asking for one additional head for data analysis, definitely there will be challenge.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with that.
Do you think?
For example, even in my company, we have data analysis program, but it's only for our own consumption, for the consumption of internal audit department. We are not staffed enough to cater to the rest of the business. But I would like to be in a situation where we have that expertise and we can provide that service to many segments of our business in terms of data analysis. But we are not staffed like that. So our data analysis is confined to what internal audit department requires for doing its own job.
It kind of raises the question and concern also linked to cybersecurity. Is it that for me seems to be a risk to every business in the world, that it's not going away. It's not one of those issues that you fix once and that's it done, because next week the approach could be different. Your vulnerabilities could be different also because of that. Do you see a call for there to be more collaboration between corporations and the government with regards to cybersecurity and the sharing of information and findings, so that the fight against it can be collective rather than siloed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you said has already started in US. The US government shares a lot of information with the business, and they have a lot of conferences where business also shares information with the government. There are websites by US government where all this information is available, which companies can use. Yeah, this collaboration definitely is required, not only between business and government, even within businesses also. They should share information, because cybersecurity, demon is common for everybody, right? So everyone is scared of that one single problem. So definitely people should share information so that they can become more secure.
Do you think as well that one of the concerns, when I've raised that topic with others, some of the concerns from other leaders is that companies typically, if they find a vulnerability, especially if they find it after the fact and after something's happened, sharing that information unless they're absolutely required to typically isn't good for business, and that keeping that news internal is on an overall business perspective, more, is to protect yourself. And that seems to be one of the concerns where, and also one of the hurdles to say, well, if you're not going to share the information and company B is not going to share the information, you can't learn from each other. And there seems to be very much a saving face, and it seems to be a big concern. Do you think that's a hurdle that eventually, if some of the big companies start doing this more actively with each other, that the others might follow? Or do you think that these findings and vulnerabilities will always just be kept kind of a secret?
You see, it's both ways. See, the thing is that this started happening, this disclosure, because of compliance requirement. That is how it started, not because companies were thinking that they should disclose, right? Because ultimately it affects the reputation of the company, and reputational risk is the biggest in today's world, particularly if your company is listed. So it started with compliance, and it still is about compliance. It's not about, okay, I found something within my company, I need to tell the world and I'll go and tell. I think it started with compliance, and for some more time it will continue to be driven by compliance only. I don't think that companies will disclose what is not disclosed for compliance requirements. I don't think so. Yeah. Because I can see, management and even board thinking about its ramifications on the reputation, on the share price and everything. And it, as you said, it becomes a hurdle. And I don't think it will be solved very quickly, very easy.
Yeah, okay. So Satnam, in terms of an auditor's career and their lifespan in their professional life, audit appears to produce so many senior leaders in the business as well. Many CFOs, many CIOs, many chief execs as well of big companies have spent sometimes a small amount of time and sometimes a considerable amount of time in audit. Why do you think internal audit does produce so many senior leaders around the world?
I think it's the exposure an auditor gets in this department. So an auditor will go to different engagements, will look at the different processes, and will learn out of that. There could be a payment clerk or payment manager who is only looking at the accounts payable process. There could be another guy who's only looking at the customer side of it, and somebody just looking at the journal ledger. But auditor is going to review each and every process. And in a large company, that person could be exposed to reviewing one process at one location and the same process at another location, and find the differences and figure out which one is better. So this kind of exposure to different areas of business gives them a lot of knowledge and confidence, and that is the reason they can branch out to do amazing things, not only in auditing but in other functions of the business. And I've seen that happen in this company and elsewhere also.
Okay. Do you think as well, having worked in India, Nigeria, Canada, and now the US, I see a lot of leaders in audit and also the business. Many of them have experience outside of their home comforts. Is that something that from your experience, was important in your progression and development within audit?
I wouldn't say that experience in different countries was responsible for the progression, but it definitely helped. And I'll give a very interesting example here. I don't know if it is a very good example, but when I was working in India and Nigeria many years back, more than 25 years back, the thumb rule used to be that if you can pass your external audit, then your accounts are fine. There was nothing about ethics, there was nothing about what the disclosure rules are. As long as your auditor has given the report, then you are okay. And I have seen auditors, accounting firms, as well as companies cook their books, both in India and in Nigeria. And I had seen the inner working of that as well. So when I moved to North America, then that knowledge about how fraudsters used to work in high echelons of corporation and auditing firms, that knowledge helped me to perform fraud investigations in North America very, very successfully. Because the fraud mind is same, it doesn't matter where you are, that mind is same. It wants to, misuse assets of the company and do embezzlement and that kind of thing with different schemes. And what I had learned in those times where ethics was not a requirement, and when just auditor signature used to be good for your disclosure, I saw how people used to cook their books, and that helped me figure out many, many frauds in North America.
So your experience, bringing your experience from one location in one country to another, is very, very transferable. From an experience standpoint, and gaining the exposure to businesses and business areas in different countries and different cultures and different issues, is it something that you would advise, for example, an auditor who is considering a relocation, but they're maybe not fully sure whether it's a good idea or something that they should do? What would you say to them from your experience?
Well, I think I wouldn't tie it to the profession of internal audit, but I think working in different countries and different cultures in itself is a very enriching experience, and it develops the character and the personality anyways. And everybody is encouraged to do that if it is possible for them.
Do you think it's something that, if you were to have an auditor, let's say, for example, a global auditor, that's traveling the world, and if there's an auditor out there that's looking for a role where they can get that international experience, is already having an international move something that's going to help prepare them for auditing business in different countries?
Definitely. And I have seen, the people who work for us, who have worked for me in the past, most of these young, minds, and they want to explore the world through these auditing engagements. As I mentioned before, that not only they get exposure to the different business processes, but if they move around, it also gives them exposure to different cultures. And the impact of culture on the business processes is very significant. I think we were talking offline before that the perspective of how business is done in Asia Pacific is not the same how business is done in Europe, and is not the same how business is done in North America. Mm-hmm. So if somebody is exposed to different areas of the globe, then they'll have that perspective, they'll understand it, and they'll be able to manage that.
One of the surprising questions that I'm asked from auditors around the world, and it doesn't happen so often, but it does occasionally, I am occasionally asked this question. I'll be asked, I'm considering pursuing the CISA certification or CIA or something like this. What value and importance do you feel that these certifications have to the profession, and what do you get out of that?
I think your specific question is about CISA, but first I'll say that all certifications are important because certifications provide you the guidelines about your profession, how you're supposed to conduct it, what kind of ethics you're supposed to follow. So of course all certifications and to maintain them is very, very important for the auditor. CISA to me is very, very important for everybody. Everybody should try to do, even if they don't get the certification, they should go through that process. Because as I mentioned before in one of your previous questions, that knowledge of different domains is very significant, very, very important to be a good auditor or to be a good, risk assessor. So the same example I would give before, if I know how an IT system is working, I can also figure out how IT system could be exploited by somebody. And if I have that knowledge when I'm doing a business process audit, then I'll be in a much, much better position to look at the risks, identify